Hi everyone, and welcome to Innovating for Good, a monthly series brought to you by UNHCR Innovation and plus SocialGood. I'm Chris Ernie, co-leader of UNHCR Innovation. More than a buzzword, innovation has become a necessity in the humanitarian sector. By innovation, we're talking about much more than new technology. Innovation in the humanitarian sector is about being adaptive so that we can efficiently face new challenges. It's also about finding new, creative, and sustainable ways to solve our biggest problems. Innovating for Good wants to have a dialogue about how innovation can impact humanitarian work. Last month, we looked at education in emergencies and how we can provide quality educational experiences to children and young people who are displaced. Since we started this series, we've looked at innovations adopted or driven by humanitarian organizations largely. But we haven't really answered the question, what if we empowered communities to innovate for themselves? What would it look like to build up the creative capacity in local communities together with local communities? So today we wanted to have that conversation, and I've got with me 4 panelists who've been working in this area who can share some lessons learned about building the creative capacity of local communities with local communities. Before I introduce our panelists today, I wanted to let you know that you can ask questions at any time during the Hangout by either tweeting a question using the hashtag #InnovForGood or through the Q&A tool on the Hangout page. Be sure to include the hashtag on Twitter or we may not see your tweet. So, who have we got with us today? I'll start off by introducing Amy Smith, founder and co-director of the MIT D-Lab, Yona Rapishti, network coordinator for the International Development Network, or IDIN, hosted at MIT, and Emmanuel Osasem, who is an IDIN member. We're also joined by Keiko Odashiro, Associate Community Services Officer, and also one of UNHCR Innovation's fellows at UNHCR. So let's get into the conversation. I wanted to start with you, Amy. So what I wanted to ask is for you to kind of put this topic into context. You've done a lot of work in this area, in particular setting up networks of support for local innovators. But before we dive into this further, I wanted to ask you, what do we mean by local innovation?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So if you think about a lot of innovations throughout development, both humanitarian and other development projects, a lot of the innovations come from outside of communities, right? And so you can look at the way in which you would develop those innovations as being designed for people or designed for the users, right? And we use often human-centered design practices where the designers and the users talk a lot and there's interactions, but they are separate. Another way of doing innovation is through co-creation, where the users and the designers work together to create a technology. But again, there's still this differentiation. And I think local innovation is different because the users and designers are the same people. And so you have design for, design with, and then design by. And I think local innovation is all about design by people who are living in the situation in which the interventions are going to be deployed. And so that's what we mean by local innovation, it's not being done by people external to the situation, but internally by the creative people who are experiencing the actual situation themselves.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Amy. I think that's probably the best description of local innovation I think I've ever heard. But listen, I want to keep the conversation going. Eman, I can revert back to you. You were kind enough to give us the context there and give us a little bit of you gave us the context. Maybe I can flip that question to you while we work out the technical glitch that we've got in Uganda. So again, in your experience, what are some of the more successful examples that you've seen of local innovation? It could be field trips that you've been on, or people that you've been working with in the field.
Sure, and one of the things that I'd like to stress is a little bit just about why is local innovation important, and because it's not just about the product of innovation, right? It's the process of innovation and the sense of agency that people get believing that they can create solutions to their own projects, not expecting that people external to their community will create solutions to their problems. And so that I think is critically important. And the example that I'd like to share is an example from a small village, Amokolagwai, in northern Uganda, where there was a community that we had done some local innovation trainings with, and over the last several years they've been creating a variety of technologies, but one of my favorites was a brick maker that they had built. It started because they wanted to bake bread, they wanted to have a bakery to generate income, but they didn't have an oven. And so they wanted to build an oven, but they didn't have bricks. So they wanted to make bricks, but it was very tedious making them one at a time, and they were not consistent. So they built a machine which allowed them to make 9 bricks at a time. It was a brick mold, and it was really slick because the way that it worked, you filled the mold with mud, and then you lifted up the mold, slid it back over the bricks that you had just made, and you could lower it again and make the next batch of bricks. And it allowed them to make bricks much faster. And the thing that which was great about this was that we were able to, the community was able to overcome barriers that were in the way. And I think that's the important thing about building the capacity for local innovation, is that barriers are hurdles, they're not walls. They're things that you can get over, there's things that you can pass by, they're not things that you can't get through. And creating that mindset is really important. And so that's to me symbolized how successful the program had been in that community. That instead of saying, well, I guess we won't have a bakery, let's think of a sewing project, they said, we want to do a bakery, and these are the steps we need to do to get there. And so that was that's one example that I think shows sort of the power of building local innovation. Even though we had never trained them in anything even related to brick making, the process we had shared in the local innovation training was something that they applied to other aspects of their life. And so that's one example from my side. And it looks like Emma might be back online now, and maybe could share some from the trainings that he's done there.
Yeah, just to pick on from what Emma said, one of the innovations I want to share from Soroti. Soroti is in eastern part of Uganda, where a farmer and a farmer group, they co-created and made a tuber slicer. A tuber slicer is a simple tool that they made, and initially it was made with an idea that it could slice more than what they used to do when they used their hands and just using a local knife. So the idea is they had something that chips, just slice some chips so that they can easily dry. That was the idea behind the innovation, and those were all ideas that came from the group members. So they made the first prototype, and it worked. It's something which worked, but always it works, then there's always something to improve. So even the improvement and the feedback came from the other group members. So we worked on the first prototype, it worked. The second prototype, so it better in material, better in structure, better in the beauty, and some of those aspects were not given keen attention initially. So at the end of the day, you find that the people themselves co-created a solution. Right now we're in like solution 4. Solution 4 is totally different from solution 1, but it started from solution 1. But you find that now we are selling solution 4 and people buying them. That's the beauty about it. People are buying these prototypes. And like the tuber slicer is going for $5 and it's selling. When the season comes, it sells. That's one of them. And that was in Soroti, and that in the eastern part of Uganda. And also the other thing I wanted to add is the energy saving stove that the people from Palisa district, that is still there in the east, not the very far east, the near east. Palisa district, the farmers made they looked at the stove that we demonstrated to them, and they picked interest. But this time around they were using so the stove we demonstrated had other mixtures and things, chemical and everything like that, mixtures that they couldn't afford. But they told us that, and they assured us that they're going to make the stove. So they made an energy saving stove in structure, which might not be as perfect as the one we demonstrated. which is industrialized, but it was a very good energy saving stove. Very good. The mixture, they made some, the lining, they used some ash, and they told me the reason being, if fire stayed in ash for long, you'll always find that fire the next day. That was so powerful. That was so great. There was a chemistry behind it. So it was really so interesting. So that's what I also love. And they're also selling the stove. Right now they're selling a stove at $8. That's around 25,000 Uganda shillings. And these are people in the local community. So they make the things, they never stop at making them. They improve on them. When they improve on them, they themselves give feedback at times. At times the users, the first time users give feedback. But at the end of the day, you find that they sell them. That is the end result. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks. Thanks so much for quite a comprehensive answer there. I think we got a really good insight into local innovations in Soroti. I wanted to flip a question over to Keiko as well. Before I do that, I know that there are people with questions over Twitter. I don't think we're seeing all of them, so just a quick reminder: use the hashtag #InnovForGood. And then you can ask Emmanuel or Keiko or Amy or Yona any question that you'd like. So just wanted to put that out there. Keiko, you're one of UNHCR's innovation fellows. You're in the second cohort. So we started the innovation fellowship in 2013 and 14. Keiko's now in the new and improved version of the innovation fellowship. Prior to being an innovation fellow, Keiko's been doing has a wealth of experience together with UNHCR. So I wanted to ask you, Keiko, what are some of the successful models of local innovation that you've seen?
I think I just need to really build on what Amy and then Emmanuel said. It's really, for me, the successful model depends on the process, and as much as the end users, how much we were able to engage and involve the end users, and we call it beneficiaries in UNHCR, because this engagement, level of engagement, involvement eventually leads to project ownership and sustainability, as well as the building confidence in the individuals that we are aiming to serve, and then also the community confidence that we are trying to build. The process, for me, is really like involving and engaging end users from the program, from really the start of the project, which is the program identification, and then idea generation, of course, and then iterate and then prototype, and then finally development of some sort of project, product, and service, and also not to really end this, to implement together, and then also evaluate and monitor and evaluate together. So a lot of times I have many projects that I developed together with the refugee communities, and I saw half of the projects fail, and then the other half actually became successful. And then a lot of projects that failed actually end when the funding ends. So eventually people are not taking ownership of the project, and then people are actually not connected anymore, and then the project ends. And then people depend on so much on funds, in terms of operation costs, and then not really maximizing what is really available in the community. So it dies down when the fund ends. And the other thing is, I always use as one of the criteria for success is really building a confidence. We do a lot of focus group discussions after the, okay, so the end of the project, which is funding end, but still, of course, we will support the continuation of the project, but we usually see, the change in their attitudes and mindset, and then even faces when they talk about what they have done, during the project, and then even like having that self-confidence, having that confidence that they can actually solve any problem or any issue that they face, in their community or in their, individual life. So that's one of the things. And the other thing is the role model. When when one becomes successful in the community, and especially traumatized community that we are actually facing with the refugees or war affected communities in Uganda, we see how having role models in your own local community is very, very important and valuable. And that's one of the things that I guess I always use as a criteria for successful project, product, or any service that we develop.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much, Keiko. Emmanuel, I wanted to kind of build off of the two of you, and again put this one back to you. You know, what do you see as being the right environments for local innovation? What variables do we need to get right so that local innovation can take place, or indeed do we need to make sure that there are those variables there?
Syria, I've been good on the question very well. The question?
Sorry, yeah, no. I just wanted to understand from your perspective, what do you see as being the key things that need to be in place for local innovation to thrive?
Oh, thank you so much. So one of the things that I know that works very well is an inclusive approach. From the beginning of a local innovation, having a local idea to innovate for the local people, we should mind about the inclusive approach, putting them together and like putting the local innovators at the forefront of innovation, like the way Amy put it. You be at the back and they be at the forefront, and that is how it always comes through for us. And the other thing is you have to articulate issues according to what the environment is dictating. What I'm trying to mean there is so the local innovators from different environments or different localities have different challenges. So before we start to innovate, or before the whole entire process gets on innovation, you find that we need to identify these challenges. So the challenges in the eastern part of Uganda are not are not always the same challenges like in the western part of Uganda. These are totally different. If there is any cross section, then maybe one or two. But if we never identify these elements, like these challenges, then we may not be addressing problems to a particular community. So what drives innovation, or what drives the innovative approach is first identifying the challenges, the community challenges of that particular community in northern Uganda, in eastern Uganda. So if you're to do an innovative training or teach people on innovation or co-create with them, you should co-create on solutions that directly affect them. So that is one of the very key things I really go for when we're talking about local innovation. The other thing is doing on-site trainings. Like if I'm doing a training in a local village in Soroti, that is in eastern Uganda, I should go and I should never call the local people to Kampala to train them. No, that is very far. I take the training right in the village. So when I put the training in the village, I can be as a trainer plus other things, like plus other people around. You find that we can map the resources. That is one of the things that helps us. So we can map the resources of that local community. So we know that this is the resource around. This is how far, I mean, the materials are. This is how far the welder is. This is how far the carpenter is. We shall be educated. That is, if we take the training or the local innovation right at the local places. But if you call the people to maybe a town or a suburb, like a busy area, a peri-urban area, when they're supposed to be in the local place, it ceases to not to put root in them. Like the root is not put there, right? So that is those are the few key things that I feel like what really local innovation would contain, like the elements. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. No, I couldn't agree more. We start with the challenge that we're trying to solve, and then yeah, I couldn't agree more. I wanted to move on to Yona. You've got a lot of experience setting up these types of programs. I understand from my own experience, as well as from what Emmanuel's been saying, you know, that different contexts are different. So what I wanted to ask you is, might it be the case that local innovation won't work everywhere? And in your experience, what makes one location or one context more suitable for a model like this?
Yes, thank you so much. That's an excellent question. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that very often it's not the technology itself that is the issue, because we do have many different kinds of solar lights, many different kinds of cook stoves, many different kinds of water filters. But it's that very often these technologies are failing to get into the hands of individuals that they can use them. So there's a lot of challenges in getting these products, once they are developed, to markets. Some of the challenges of BOP markets are that they're geographically, linguistically, even culturally dispersed, and finding potential customers is difficult. And these customers themselves very often have very little disposable income. So when we talk about these technologies really getting larger and getting to scale, we think we have to also think about issues like product financing, transportation, maintenance, and repair. And so when we talk about local innovation and growing local innovation, we also have to bring this particular perspective to bear as well. So it's not just about empowering the local innovator to innovate and to have an idea, but it's about creating the whole system, the whole ecosystem around the individual to enable this idea to become a prototype, and then to also be disseminated, whether it's via a market dissemination or whether it's via training and application and other open source methodologies. So at IDIN, we have been thinking about this a lot, and there are a few things that we have identified that really tend to create a more effective ecosystem in which local innovation can thrive. The first one is education and knowledge. So really proximity to spaces where local innovators can continue to grow their skill set, whether this is technical skills, business skills, or other kinds of skills that will enable them to move the technologies forward. The other that I'm sure many have thought of or heard of is really lack of resources. So working with local innovators to provide them with capital, and this is both human capital, so finding them partners and people that they can engage with, but also, of course, financial capital. And this also includes infrastructure. So having local spaces in which people can go to physically meet each other and iterate technologies or even services, because we're really focusing on the technology aspect right now. But when we talk about innovation, innovation can be anything beyond a physical product. And then the other two things that I would also like to mention that really help foster this enabling ecosystem is policy. So a decent regulatory system, and this is where it's very critical to work with local stakeholders. These can be at the government level, but they can also be individuals that hold power in that context. And also the second is this culture of collaboration. So allowing individuals to meet other like-minded individuals and to be able to create communities where they can engage with one another and exchange ideas. For example, Silicon Valley is also often used as an example of this very thriving innovation ecosystem, and it's because it's a place where collaboration, policies, education, knowledge, infrastructure, and resources are all within the same space. So if we look at it at this multifaceted approach, then thinking about how we can better engage NGOs, big international groups like UNHCR and the UN, but also local government and also the private sector. It leaves a lot of space in which we can bring all these different actors together so that we are not just supporting lone innovators to ideate, but actually creating a coherent pipeline that enables these technologies to get to the hands of those that need it most.
Brilliant, thanks, thanks, Yona. I wanted to go back to Keiko again because I know that you've been experimenting with a lot of different approaches in Uganda. Maybe you can just outline briefly some of the work that you're doing with communities in Uganda, number one, and number two, if you can identify some of the challenges that you've faced in your own work.
Thank you, Chris. Briefly, I have actually two projects that I'm working with in Uganda under I-Fellowship program, and then both of them are mostly, one of them is called Youth-Spark Hub. It is basically by using the power of media and information technology, exploiting all the tools that we have to enhance the social innovation and the entrepreneurship among youth in Uganda. So basically what we're doing is to really co-create a youth-to-youth, peer-to-peer learning platforms where we can connect, where youth can connect, themselves in youth-to-youth, for peer support and mentorship, and then connecting youth to mentors and then potential donors, resources that they can avail. And the other project that I'm doing is the HANDS project. It's called HANDS project. It's a collaborative project with the Innovation Center, which is Emma is in charge. We are the co-lead of this project. So that this project is basically to develop a training curriculum using a different innovation methodologies to really build the self-confidence of traumatized individuals and communities to overcome their trauma, and then to be able to innovate and then develop community solutions and even life challenges, like the solutions for their life challenges. So one of the methodologies, and I found it really, really interesting, is this participatory co-designing. So in my line of work, I always work with the refugee communities. I'm very close to them. And then when I learned at the first, what the human-centered design approach is all about, collaborative approach to develop innovation project, I thought, like, why don't we actually do this together with the end users, rather than, having this, like, all this prototyping, idea generation, prototyping away from end users and only gaining feedback. It is more meaningful, and it's more learning opportunities for us, like service providers, to really to learn what the refugees or Ugandan communities really need, what their dreams and aspirations, and then what our interests is, and then merge all these our ideas, and then the feelings and everything together. So I found this participatory co-designing really, really meaningful, and then we are actually doing quite well. I can see, I talked about this successful model of this innovation, local innovation. I see, people taking, I'm working with a lot of young people. I'm taking young people leading and taking ownership, in the meetings, and then even prototyping and refining it. And I see a lot of young people's confidence, actually self-confidence, being built. So I think that's what I have seen. Like, we developed a core team, youth core team for Youth-Spark Hub. It's called One Youth, One Heart. Even to develop this concept, we use a human-centered design approach. What is really the major issue that youth in Uganda are facing, inclusive refugee youth? So we sat down together, we brainstormed, and then we thought that it's so important to bridge the gap between Ugandan and refugee youth, or even there's a lot of divides and gaps between youth, even among Ugandan youth. and among refugee youth. So how might we build that gap, fill in the gaps, that we see, to really facilitate that platform the youth can work together. So far it's really good. And then I would like to also talk about challenges and lessons that I learned. So one of the challenges that I'm facing is we have core team, and then we have also targeted youth. And then I see a lot of power relationships, a lot of team dynamics among the core team and then between core team and targeted youth. And when we talk about co-create peer-to-peer learning platform, we are actually assuming that core team, potential targeted youth can be our potential core members and then co-create. So we are having issues of this idea of co-creation because everybody, maybe I have assumptions. One of them is everybody has a different idea of co-creation. And then we basically do not know, or are not able to explain what the co-creation is all about until we really, go through this process of co-creation. So that's number one. And the other things that we notice is, the power relationship that we talked about, between core team, youth team, that, actually driving the process of the, all development of prototypes and so forth. And then targeted fellow youth. How can, because we use the words in UNHCR often, provision and assistance, and all these words, we providing assistance, we providing services, but it doesn't really cling well when we talk about co-creation, creating together, something together with the, beneficiaries, or even the word beneficiary doesn't really sound right. So we are doing a lot of words, like reversing that, that power, like a dynamics that we have between service providers, and then also, I don't really know, like, let's say beneficiary, but we are trying to, say that they're partners. So the word, we have some of the words that we are not using, we're prohibiting it, and we are replacing these words in something more positive. That's something that, we think that actually, leads to co-creation. The other thing is human-centered design approach. It's really fun, and then it's somebody like me, always like to, like to do fun events and activities and experimenting. Really, really love this approach, and I really love to work with a lot of people. But the one thing that I noticed in other challenge is it is really labor intensive, and it is time consuming. I have never finished any meeting less than 2 hours. When we decide even one use one had the concept development, it took a whole day. So I see some of the people getting really tired because again, a meeting. But I saw also some other people who actually feel like, wow, this is really great. And the people are actually, embracing that, concept. Rather than, let's say Emma developed this concept, what do you think? And then we gain feedback. We actually develop it together. So it's meaningful, but at the same time, it's time consuming. And I think this also relates to my last challenge. The team dynamics is really hard. And Yona was talking about, developing this ecosystem, and I found it really, really important. When we do this Youth Spark Hub project, I needed, young people who knows, information technology. I need people, who actually, are actually have a facility of all these skills, the media, which is not really my area. So I think having that, the right people in your core team, I find it really, really important. But at the same time, we also need like-minded individuals to start with as a core team, because innovation project, process of developing innovation project is really, really long term. You can't really develop one project, in a matter of seconds, because it's collaborative approach. Every prototype, every assumption that we have, we need to test together with the core team, because otherwise, again, the team dynamics, we're gonna be separated, from each other. There's a tension. So I would say, like, I'm really energetic person, so I will always dive into things, But at the same time, like, I run out of energy sometimes because it's really, really long process. So you need to start with the like-minded people, for example, like Emma, that, okay, I'm a bit, slow. I want to slow down a little bit, but I have Emma, actually, who can lead this one. So we need always people who actually back you up. So my lesson learned really from this innovation, like empowering local innovators, and then, even like developing, together with the people to a innovation project is really start small, but start with people, like-minded people that, they can back you up and they can support you. So I think that's all. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Keiko. That's fantastic. Listen, I wanted to. Sorry, I'm just going to mute you. I wanted to flip back over to Amy, because I think you've got a few things that you might want to inform us around Rethink Relief and the approach around it. So over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so we have been working on a project which is similar to what Keiko was talking about, and it started about 5 years ago with a design summit where we brought together people from many different backgrounds, designers, engineers, people who had lived through refugee situations, in order to look at how could we create technologies that could help ease the transition and the recovery from a refugee situation to the situation we brought together a variety of people, held the conference in TU Delft, and we really focused on that transition. And it was a really great event with the co-creation between people from so many different disciplines, and that's, I think, where you see a lot of innovation happening, when you bring together different backgrounds and different experiences and different perspectives. So the next year we held another design summit, and we focused not only on this idea of transition, but also the idea of well-being. We worked with Médecins Sans Frontières, and one of the things that they commented on is that soon after the initial disaster or tragedy, one of the biggest things that brings people to the clinic is their mental well-being as opposed to their physical well-being. And so we were thinking about what are technologies that we could create that help to build people's their whole well-being as opposed to just focusing on their physical needs. And that's one of the things where I think design comes into it. I think everyone who's ever built something, when you've finished and it works, you feel this incredible joy, right? You feel pride in yourself for making something happen. You feel a sense of agency about being able to create something that could maybe make a difference in your life. And honestly, you're just happy. I mean, it's a great experience. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to use the concept of design as a tool to promote well-being. So that was really the focus of the next conference. The third one that we ran was in Uganda, working in collaboration both with communities who had lived in camps during the war and now were in that transition process. But we also were fortunate to have participants come from the South Sudanese refugee camps up in Ailo, and to come down from Adjumani district and participate. And this was an incredibly powerful experience where we had current refugees, past refugees, designers, students, and all sorts of interested people together, looking at creating technologies that focused again on transition, focused also on the well-being, and then we added a third lens this time, which was inclusion. So how can we engage people who are normally marginalized by a lot of the traditional humanitarian approaches? And again, we had sort of 2 weeks in which people worked together on the design process and then created prototypes, which I'm happy to say are all moving forward both in the communities and outside the communities as we continue through the process that Emma talked about before, which is starting from your first prototype and iterating through multiple prototypes. So, so these summits have been really powerful experiences for all the people who've attended, but they're just one aspect of it. I think that this idea of creating products and programs is important, but there also has to be a couple of accompanying aspects to it. So, for example, I think similar to what Keiko was talking about, building capacity within the refugee camps themselves. So doing trainings within the camps to build people's capacity for creation, for design, for innovation, not just because of what's needed in the camp at the time, but because it will better prepare them as they leave and return to their homes if they have this sense of confidence in their ability to create solutions not just to a problem, but to any problem. And so this type of training, I think, is something that's really important for us to incorporate in the way that we do education, the way that we do outreach within the camps. Another aspect of things that I think is important to add to this sort of the capacity building and the product development is sort of looking at a more holistic programmatic approach. So working with organizations that are involved with humanitarian aid, and looking at how can they, from the very first interventions, be looking towards solutions that will help in the final recovery and transition. Because if you start at day one, I wish it were only 100, but it's closer to 1,000 or beyond, will become easier. So I think this combination of enabling people, creating products, and transforming programs will be a powerful trio towards a more effective role of humanitarian aid that helps to engage people in sort of building their future as part of their process. And I think that sort of builds on the principles that both Emma and Keiko talked about in creating this infrastructure and this ecosystem, similar to what Yona was also speaking towards.
Great, thanks, thanks, Amy. Listen, I actually wanted to take a question from Celia, who tweeted a question to us. So her question is, how can we involve the elderly population in local innovation processes? And for this one, I wanted to ask Emmanuel if you could respond to Celia.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think you can try and respond to that. One main important thing is that our process is always there is no education, like education requirement, like for training on innovation. There is no priority, and in fact, we train even the old people. So the point is the curriculum is totally basic. It's basic in the way that it brings out the most local of the local person out. So we start from a very basic background, somebody who cannot even understand what design is. Then we get to a level where they can see and appreciate it, and we get to a level where they can make the technologies on their own. So there's nothing that will frustrate an old man from the kind of approach that we use to that. Then, but then we clearly put the basic approach there. Then we find that an old person, age is not the limit, not even resource, not even education, not even any procedure. So I would also invite like Amy, if you can add on what I've just said. Like Amy really can back me up on that. And you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Emma and I have been involved in some trainings together with some amazing, probably 75, 80-year-old people who honestly put us to shame in terms of their energy level. And I think what is, I think, the most important thing is a basic belief in everyone in being able to design and create, regardless of their age, regardless of their physical capacity, regardless of their gender. And I think that's, you have to have that underlying respect and belief in order for local innovation to happen. And I think that, as Emma said, the curriculum is accessible, but more important, the trainers are open. That everyone believes that anyone can contribute, and you know, it might take there might be times where arthritis makes it harder to hold a hammer, so we might help them a little bit for tasks which are a little bit harder. But honestly, a lot of times, I remember I had a case where I had some tendinitis and I couldn't hold a hammer, and it was a 75-year-old woman who pounded nails for me. And I think that just basic respect for capacity is critical in fostering local innovation, and it can't be something that is comes out of your mouth. It has to come out of your heart.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So I had there were a couple of comments that a couple of our Twitter, a couple of people joining the conversation from Twitter had to offer to the conversation. So I wanted to just one tweet from Amma, and he wanted to just say that the problem isn't about the lack of innovators or ideas. The problem is about the scattered energy of innovators working alone. And I think that kind of touches upon something that you, Amy, you were just talking about. Definitely resonates with us in UNHCR Innovation, and I'm sure it does for Keiko, who's one of our innovation fellows in Uganda. But moving on from Emma's comment, there's a question from Kisu, and I'm gonna shoot this one to you, Yona. How do you maintain community engagement and trust if an innovative project fails or yields unexpected or undesirable results?
Excellent question. So one of the things that we try to think of failure as something that is almost embedded and included in the process. And that doesn't mean that the project itself fails, but we view design as not necessarily, and innovation as not a linear process. So that means that we really experiment and iterate and allow for room for projects to pivot because they are embedded in the community, and that we the way that we approach a lot of the design and the technology development is by really closely embedding them with the communities, co-creating, but then also getting step-by-step feedback along the way. So even though failures are at times, they do happen, we try to create a system in which there's less risk, and people work faster and then can incorporate the risk in how they develop their projects. The other thing that I also wanted to bring in the concept that you mentioned that Amir put he included as a Twitter comment, and it's very much when we think about failure, we do think about how we can connect innovators to their own community, but also to other individuals to collaborate. So we're moving away and beyond the local innovator into actually a system where they can engage and they can continue getting continued support.
Okay, thanks very much, Yona. Listen, we've been going for about 50 minutes, so I wanted to pose one last question, and this one again is for you, Yona. You've been talking about creating ecosystems and support networks. I wanted to touch again on sustainability and longevity of local innovations. You mentioned earlier the importance of the market. And I wanted you to kind of dig into this one a little bit more. Can you give us examples of projects that you've worked on in which you've really tried to build the sustainability into that local innovation, and how that local innovation has reached the market, either successfully or unsuccessfully?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So I can try to give examples from both sides of the spectrum because, as I tried to mention, is that there's different ways of reaching scale, and one can be through the market, the other can be through this dissemination and learning that can be passed on within the community of innovators themselves. And the other thing that I want to mention about sustainability too is that it's embedded in our approach from the start. At the community level, you know, there's programs that take a technology and then bring it into a community and teach the community on how to use it, and this may help that community solve that problem. But if you really start with a design process, then it doesn't really matter what problem the community wants to solve, because they have been trained and they have been empowered and they have been taught to think about how they themselves can use scarcity, can use their local resources, and can use the other individuals that are in that community to create solutions to those local problems. So one example that we're currently working with that is this kind of dissemination approach is a local innovator from a fishing town called Papua in Zambia. His name is Robert, and he came to one of our design summits, and the problem that he had identified when he came to the design summit was that there was a lot of fishermen in his little town, and they were fishing, but because there was no power, there was no connectivity to electricity, a lot of the fish would spoil, and it would also it would be dried, but the value, the market value of the fish would be a lot lower. So he used his skills and also the design process, and he involved the local fishing cooperative to design a turbine that actually helped power cold storage along the river. And then he's working with the individuals in the cooperative to be able to lease this cold space that they can then put the fish in there and then gain better value. So he's now in the process where he's been testing this turbine, and it's very much a community-based project. And it's something that is increasing the value and improving the livelihoods of a whole community. And it's reaching, and it's getting visibility within a national institution in Zambia as well as some local media. And so that's one example of someone that's making a difference within their own community. At the other end of the spectrum, actual product that has reached market is one in the healthcare sector that I can mention. And the name of the innovator is Zubaida Bai, and she has been in our network for numerous years now, and she has been both a participant and also a facilitator in our summits. And she also identified a local problem, which was that a lot of women in India, in the country where she's from, are giving birth in very unsanitary and unclean conditions. So she developed a very simple kit that costs about $2 to $4, that has all the essential components for a clean birth and the delivery of a child in a hospital, but also in another context. So Zubaida now has been able to take this product not only in an Indian market, and it sold about 50,000 there, but is also now working with innovators in our network to start dissemination in places like Zambia, Ghana, and I'm blanking out on. I think Kenya is the third country.
Thanks very much, Yona. So I wanted to see if there were any more questions from our friends on Twitter, and I'm not seeing too many. There's a question from QI Somalia, which is about replicable health solutions for low-resource countries. But maybe I can tease out of this question a little bit. I wanted to, Amy, put this one to you. You're probably more experienced than any of us on this subject. But when we're talking about replication of local innovation specifically, what are the kind of things that we need to see are in place to either replicate a good local innovation or to systematically replicate good local innovations? Can I ask you to respond to that one?
Sure. So one of the things that I think is important is, first of all, to come up with the appropriate model for replication. And by that I mean you would want to think about what I call the maker model. So if you wanted to get 1 million things out to people in the world, you could have either a centralized facility which makes 1 million and distributes them, or you could have 1 million people each making their own. And both of those get 1 million things out there. And so before you engage with the process of dissemination, you would want to think of what type of model it would be. Most likely something in between, but I think that's critical before you develop the model, right? And then depending on what type of model you develop, you would choose a different type of supporting infrastructure. So if you wanted to do something where you had many makers producing items for a small number of people, then you would invest in education and manufacturing resources. If you were looking at centralized production, then you would look at investing in supply chains, in transportation, in advertising and marketing. So the main thing that I can say is there's no one method that you should use, because it depends on your product and it depends on your approach. And if there's anyone who thinks that there's a simple answer that applies to all products, then I might challenge them. And so, but I think the most important thing is to recognize there's a spectrum of opportunities, choose the right one, and then develop the appropriate methodology for that particular model. Because if you're trying to replicate something using the wrong model, it'll lead to failure. And I think that there's been a lot of cases where things haven't worked because of the fact that we haven't chosen the right model for replication to scale.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I would I'd definitely echo what you were saying about the there not just being one model. Listen, I think I'm going to wrap up today's session. Rahel had another question to Yona, but I think it's probably quite an extensive reply that's necessary. So I'd definitely encourage Rahel. Why don't you contact me and I can put you in contact with Yona for your question. This brings us to the end of today's Hangout. I wanted to say thank you very much to all of our experts for joining us today, and I wanted to thank you for watching this month's episode of Innovating for Good. If you've missed any of the previous episodes, we're tweeting the link so that you can see them all from @UNHCR Innovation, which includes this month's this month's Hangout. Next month's episode is going to explore open innovation challenges, whether or not the model can truly work in humanitarian agencies, or at least the operations of humanitarian agencies. If you've got suggestions for future episodes, we're very, very happy to hear them. So once again, I just wanted to say thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much to all of you guys for joining in with this month's Hangout. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.